Welcome back to the Social Hour Podcast, a podcast for sewists by sewists. I'm your host, Bethany.
And I'm your host, Audra. And today we have an incredible guest with us. We have Misty Doan with us, an incredible creator, visionary, leader in our sewing space. And she's the host of At Home with Misty and Homespun at Missouri Star Quilt Company. And I call her a dear friend, and I'm so thankful she gave us her time today.
Oh, you're the best. Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here.
We are thrilled to have you, and we're so excited to learn so much about you and all that you do. As you know, our traditional way of kicking off a podcast is with a fun icebreaker question that all of us will answer. And so this week's icebreaker, just to kind of warm things up, and of course we'd love for our listeners to hop over to the Social Sewist Facebook group and answer the icebreaker question in the episode thread over there. But this week's question is, if you could sew with any historical figure or celebrity, who would it be and why?
Believe it or not, I think I would choose Bisa Butler, who she's not a historical figure, but she's a current artist. And if you're not familiar with her work, you should be. Look her up. She's incredible. I admire her so much. And I think that's who I would choose. I would love to have a chance to spend an hour with her and see her work.
Audra, what about you?
I second Misty's comment about if you don't know her work. We saw her exhibit on display at Chicago Art Institute, and I think Dave took more pictures than I did because he was just absolutely in awe of her work, which is pretty great when you have a non-sewist that really loves seeing that art on display. For listeners of the podcast, we've talked about my love for history, so I don't think this will be too much of a shock. I think my answer might be surprising, though. Mine would be Queen Elizabeth I. I love history. I love the whole Tudor 15th, 16th century of England time frame. And I just think her whole story is really incredible. And so that's who I would choose. I could go on and on about that, but we're just going to leave that there.
All right. Well, I had a hard time picking. And so I kind of had to narrow down my list, and the person that I landed on is Mary Brooks Picken. Now, she passed before I was born. She passed in 1981. She was born in 1886. But the reason I picked her is because I feel like her and I are somehow like sewing related by family, by blood, because of how many things we have in common. But what really puts her on the map is the fact that she's written over 100 books on needlework, sewing, fashion, and textile arts. But what really struck me, and this is why she came to mind for me, is she wrote the first book for singer sewing. But she also started one of the biggest sewing schools. It was called the Women's Institute of Domestic Arts and Sciences in Pennsylvania. And then she also went on to be a trustee for the Fashion Institute of Technology. Her and I would have so much in common to talk about, but I feel like I could learn a lot from her, obviously. But I think it'd be really fun to share with her all that's changed in those areas since she has since passed, especially with like the technology and the new tools and the computerized sewing machines and all of that. So that's why I picked her, because I feel like we're like kindred spirits with similar paths, except I haven't done nearly as much as she has.
Well, that just opens it up for the future, right?
Right. It's just amazing to see how far back in history the impact people have made in sewing. And it's really important that we remind ourselves the history of sewing, not just what we're doing right now. All right. You ready to jump into some fun questions?
Let's do it.
Tell us, I think quite a few people are familiar with you, but for those of you who aren't, why don't you start with a little bit about your sewing journey and some of your early inspirations in sewing, because I know it comes from deep in your family, but I'd love for you to talk about that.
Sure, absolutely. So I feel really fortunate that I have women on both sides of my family who were sewing my whole life. And so for me, that was just something that was ingrained in me from the time I was a young girl. My mom does fabulous handwork. She likes the slow stitching. My grandma Sandy, though, is the one who I really attribute to sharing her love of sewing with me, to the point that it stuck with me forever. From the time I was a tiny girl, I just remember spending time digging through her button collection next to her sewing machine before I could actually sew. And then we'd make doll clothes and Barbie clothes. And then by the time I was about 15, she was very into needle turn applique and quilting. She made so much of my clothing. I mean, she was just such an incredible talent. And unfortunately, she got brain cancer. And I tell this story often because she had such a passion for sewing that even once she had brain cancer and lost the use of her right hand as a result of that treatment, she was determined to keep going. And so she said to me, you know, like, here's these two pieces, sit at the machine and sew these together. And so my first experience piecing was literally at her right hand doing what she taught me to do. And it was such a sweet and tender time that I really thought for years that I would never return to quilting because it was this sacred experience that I had with my grandma before she passed. And so I find it to be this like beautiful kismet that I get to do what I do now. And I get to tell people about her, even though she's no longer with us. She's part of my journey every single day. And I certainly wouldn't be here if it weren't for her.
I think it's incredible. You're continuing to pass that forward. And
I try, yeah.
All those stars aligned for you to take everything Grandma Sandy taught you and impugned with you with love towards the rest of the world, both in person and virtually.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes I'll be honest, because I teach to a virtual audience the majority of the time, it's easy to forget how many people are out there. Sometimes I just think I'm in a room with me and two people from our film crew, and I'm just like, shouting into the void, so to speak. But those moments where someone comes up to you, like I just had the sweetest moment yesterday. Someone's like, I just am so excited to meet you. Thank you for sharing. And it's such a good reminder to all of us that like, if we take the time to share what we know, it will make a difference in someone's life. And I've certainly become passionate about that because that was my experience. My grandma was patient with me from the time I was, I'm sure, young and obnoxious and not really that interested in being there. It developed into what has become such a love and, integral part of my life. And I'm so thankful that she was willing to teach me.
And I love that you're carrying on her memory and her legacy through what you're doing because of the impact she had on your life. And you kind of mentioned your virtual outreach, and you do a lot. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but you have Homespun with Misty, you have At Home with Misty, and then there's also double take tutorials that you do with Natalie. And so you guys do a lot of virtual content to help educate others. And I would love to know a little bit about maybe the creative process for those patterns and tutorials. Like, how do you always come up with something new?
Well, I want to preface it by saying that there are certainly hard days. And Natalie and I both have this saying where we're like, they can't all be winners. I mean, with the amount of content that we put out, because she and I both release at least one video a week. And for me, it's often more than one a week. And so it's a lot. But I do think that creativity is contagious. And when you spend your days engulfed in that process, it just continues to grow. I always highly recommend the book Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert. It talks about how creativity has kind of a life force. I completely agree. As you allow yourself to try and solve new problems, to try and create new ideas, inspiration is everywhere. So I really don't ever find inspiration to be the challenge when it comes to design, but the execution certainly can be exhausting at times. And so for me, it really is my full-time job. And so I treat it that way. I schedule design time where I just get to sit and play and cut and play with fabric, and that's part of my job. But I take it seriously. I mean, I don't have a great answer for that, except for I feel incredibly fortunate that I get to do what I do. And it just somehow, so far, I haven't run out of ideas. If that time ever comes, that will be my turn to pass this off to someone else and say, it's your turn. I have had a good run.
Big Magic is an incredible book. And for those, we'll put it in the show notes to link to for everybody. And there's a great part in Big Magic where it talks about like the idea comes to you, and if you don't jump on it, it will go to the next person because you didn't take advantage of it. Ideas have a life, in our opinion. Ideas are coming to you. They're living, breathing things that want to be brought into the world. When it comes to creativity, creativity breeds creativity. How does that transition into your family life? I know you've got 3 incredible kids at home. I know you have a house full of teenagers, and I think they've been coming over to do some hands-on projects. What does that look like, creativity and family life, and how those two things interact?
Well, a little bit of chaos, to be sure. um, and I think it's really interesting, having three kiddos, to see how their approach to creativity is very different from kid to kid. And so, like, my oldest is kind of the classic true artist. He loves to draw. He loves to animate. He loves playing with color, anything like that. And that's really, his creative world. My daughter loves photography. And so she loves, she notices things in nature and with her friends. And that's how she kind of explores her creativity, is through the photos that she takes and then how she puts them together into collages. She belongs in the scrapbook generation. And I keep telling her she needs to bring that back, because I think that would be her love, layering all of those things together with the thoughtful eye. And then my youngest, Ezra, he is wild and fun, and he is really a reminder to me that we put too many limits on ourselves, especially as adults. He is just like, you know what, this sounds fun. I want to give this a try. And so when he joins me in my sewing studio, he is like all about raw edge applique, and he'll just cut out shapes and either glue or just sit at the sewing machine with no pins, and he just goes to town and he makes super cool stuff. And so I just always try to let them be creative in their own right, and not, box that in. And I think it's just so fun to see how we all are creative in our own ways. And I think sometimes we put too much pressure to fit into a certain box, or to be a certain quilter or a certain sewist. And we don't need to do that. I think the industry as a whole is so much better off when we lean into the things that bring us joy and fill us up, and that we're excited about.
You also travel quite a bit, and you do some pretty big bucket list kind of trips. And I know you have one coming up to Kenya.
Yes.
So that's exciting. Is that like a trip with the family, or is it trip with like a group of people? Like, tell us a little bit about some of your travel, because traveling to sew and traveling because of our industry is always something that really fascinates me. And I love sharing about it, but I know that you do quite a bit of traveling as well.
Absolutely. I love to travel. Honestly, it was one of those things that has always been a goal of mine. I feel like there's so much to experience in the world. And speaking of inspiration, I get so much from my travels. As the kids got older, Jake and I both kind of had this goal that we could give them more experiences than things. And so travel became more important to us as a family. But then within the industry specifically, it never even really occurred to me that travel was a possibility with my job until learning through my mother-in-law, Jenny. And so she did a lot of, teaching at different guilds and traveling all over the world. And I got to join her on just a few of those. And I was just like, man, this is wild that you would have these wonderful opportunities present themselves because of sewing, but it happens all the time. And so I got to join her, or chose to join her on a trip that she took to Kenya, where she was the host through this company called Craftours a few years ago. And for me, I've been a lot of cool places, but that trip was life-changing for me. It really was. It was more than I ever anticipated. I, of course, was excited about it. But I think the thing that I loved the most, besides, of course, seeing these incredible animals in their natural habitats, was that getting to meet the people in Kenya and experience their life firsthand, but also see their joyfulness for life and their appreciation for all that they have, when from our, very privileged perspectives, we like to complain a lot, and we get in our heads and we think things are so hard, and we think, oh, if I have this, then life will be good. And if I have this new house or this new car. And it was such a mind shift for me to just remind myself, to us, they have nothing. And it was nothing but joy and kindness and love. And it was like, man, we need more of this. And so while I was there, I was like, I have got to get my kids back here. I want to bring my family here so they can experience this firsthand, because it was such a life-changing thing for me. And so Jim from Craftours reached out to me and he says, hey, I'd love to have you host this. And at first I was like, what? How? This is amazing. Yes. But I wasn't going to do it because my kids they're getting older and I have one graduating. And so I was like, you know what? This is just not the time. I need to be with my family. And so he said, what if we could bring your family And so we have put together this trip. My whole family will be coming with me. And it's a small group, usually between 20 and 30 attendees, and it's going to be amazing. We'll get to see the animals, we'll get to visit a local school, we'll go to a local weaving facility, bead makers. It's just incredible.
I love to hear that, and I love that you're being able to take your kids. As someone who has a son who has graduated high school and gone off to college, soak up all of that time, make those memories as much as you can, because I was just telling Audra before we recorded today, I was like, I cannot wait for him to get home, even if it's just for a weekend. It's like, I just miss him so much. And so it just makes those moments even sweeter. And so getting to take these big trips like this, especially as he's like embarking on this next chapter of his life and making those core memories, that's going to be huge for him and your whole family and everyone that gets to come. Now, I know this is airing at the end of May. When is this trip? Is there still spots open for someone
Yes,
if they wanted to join?
We still have a few spots. It's filling up, but we do still have a few left. And so we would love to have anyone who's interested join us. And I can send you guys a link, of course, that we can include where people can find
we'll
that.
put it in the show notes for sure.
Yeah, and I believe I'm getting the dates right. I think they're August 2nd through 9th.
I think that's going to be an incredible experience to hang out with the entire fam. I know it's a great, great group. I can speak to that. I can speak to that truthfully. And talk a little bit about creative confidence, being a new sewist, and any words of encouragement you might have for them.
Yeah, I'm so glad you asked that, because that's actually something that I'm super passionate about. I think as we become adults, we kind of put this expectation on ourselves that we just have to know how to do everything, when the fact of the matter is learning something new inherently comes with failure. Like, it's just part of the process. And so I love to remind new sewists that you are going to make mistakes. Every quilt I make still to this day, I have to pull out the seam ripper at least once. Like, that is just part of this process. And so don't be so hard on yourself. And the other thing I often like to tell people is it should be fun. If you're getting frustrated and you're getting mad, take a break, eat some peanut M&Ms, start over. Like, this, we're not performing brain surgery here, right? Like, this is a hobby, and a hobby should fill our buckets and make us feel good. And so if we're taking it too seriously, like, you lose that joy, and that completely defeats the purpose.
I love that. And I think it's really important to remind people as well how important the role of having a creative community can support them, especially when they're first starting. So again, kind of speaking to all the tools, and all the tutorials and everything that you do through Missouri Star and through at home with Misty, how have you seen the impact of building that kind of educational support community, even virtually, have on beginners from your own experience?
Well, like I said, I was just in town hopping, walking down the street, running to the grocery store, and someone stopped me and said, thank you so much for sharing this. And what life is that I get to share quilting tutorials that I love to make, and people come to you and thank you because it made a difference in their life. And I feel incredibly privileged that I get to do this every day. I don't take it for granted, that's for sure. I will say that we have been incredibly fortunate as Missouri Star has grown. I don't think it's very common to build a business and have people bring you cookies and write you thank you notes and tell you what a difference it makes in their lives. And I think the only reason that happens is because of this creative community and how important and healing creativity in itself can be. And I just think we're so lucky in this industry to have that inherently connects us to one another. When we take the time to share what we know with someone else, it just builds this web where we're all tied together and we can really lift each other up. And that's a beautiful thing.
I have a bonus question for you, kind of spinning off of that, because there are a lot of people in the community that do want to educate. Do you have any words of wisdom, tips, or advice for someone who wants to share what they've learned with others, and maybe best places to get started?
Absolutely. I would say start where you're comfortable. So if there is, if you're already on Facebook and you already spend a lot of time there, start there. If you're on Instagram, start there. There's so many tools available on all these different platforms now that there weren't when Missouri Star first began in 2008. And so we started on YouTube, but YouTube was only a year older than us. And so it was very new, and that was really the only place to do it. But there's so many other places now. So don't make it harder on yourself than it needs to be. That would be my first advice. And then my second advice is, I know how hard you can be on yourself as a teacher. And I would say to remember that what you have to share, even if you think somebody else is doing it and doing it better, it will connect because someone needs to hear what you have to share. And so just be kind to yourself, shake it off, and just put it out there. And even if people aren't kind, you just have to keep up with what you're doing. Ignore the comments and the haters because, they come. But there will be people who need to hear what you have to share.
I love that so much. And I think that's a positive way to kind of wrap up some of our in-depth questions we had for you. And I know that Audra and I decided that we might want to do something a little different as our second guest on our podcast, is to do maybe a little rapid fire round of questions where you can give like a 1 or 2 word answer. And then we're just going to have you answer these. They're just fun. Audra, do you want to read these off?
Sure, I'll do it.
Okay.
Morning or night sewing?
Night, for sure.
Prints or solids?
That's hard. Solids.
That was a little loaded because I totally knew what your answer was.
I know.
We played too many tutorials together for me not to know. Pre-cuts or yardage?
That really depends. If I can get what I want with a pre-cut because it saves time, I'll take it. But I like the flexibility of yardage.
Binding. Love it or hate it?
I actually love it. It's the only thing that slows me down.
Favorite quilt block of all time?
Oh my!
And it doesn't have to be yours.
I don't even know how to pick that. That's so hard. That was so hard.
All right, we'll just maybe we'll do like all of them.
Yeah, I love them all. I really do. That's hard. Any star block. How about that? That at least narrows it down. I love stars.
Cut first or press first?
Cut first.
Go-to snack while sewing, which you may have already told us.
I was gonna say I told you, peanut M&Ms.
Most used emoji when texting sewing friends?
Oh gosh, probably the
Or
upside
just texting
down
friends.
smiley face.
That was fun. That was
super fun.
Some of those were hard. Those were hard. So we do always have a little segment, like a sewing segment in each episode. And this week's segment is Thread Talk. This is where we take a little bit of a deeper dive into specific sewing topic. It could be a technique or an industry trend, a fabric, whatever. But I'd love for you to maybe share on this talk this week of Thread Talk. Do you have something to share with our listeners?
Well, I would like to specifically talk about the resurgence of young people in sewing. I have seen more and more young people excited about sewing. And I think when we lost home ec in schools that we had this huge gap for at least a generation or two where it wasn't a thing. People weren't picking up sewing as a hobby as regularly. And Audra, you kind of touched on this earlier, but I've had this great opportunity lately where my daughter was seeing things on Pinterest or on TikTok that other people were making, and she knows I can sew. And even though that's not typically her hobby, her creative hobby of choice, she came to me and was like, hey, me and my friends want to make these sweatshirts. That was the first project. And I was like, of course, yeah, come on, let's do it. And so then on Thursday nights, we get together for what they lovingly refer to as Granny Night, which I remind them, not only grannies are sewing, and this is, proof of that, but they mean it in the most loving way. And so on Thursday nights, they come to my sewing studio, and I expected it would be her and a couple of girlfriends, but we get anywhere from 8 to 12 teenagers that show up every week, girls and boys, and they just want to play and be creative. And they do everything from embellish t-shirts and hoodies to alter their pants to make pajamas. Last night they were making costumes, for some plays that they're in. And I just think it's so encouraging to me to see this next generation be excited about hobbies that we love. And so I would just say, if you have someone in your community or your family who shows even the slightest interest, I hope you will take them under your wing. like my grandma did for me, and like I've had the opportunity to do with Ashlyn and her friends, because that we want this, industry to continue to grow, because it's made such a difference in our lives. And so take that chance, love on that younger generation, and put up with their silliness and antics and let them sew.
Let them be kids. Let them enjoy some time disconnected a little bit from the devices and the socials. I love that. And I know Audra's talked on that before on the podcast when she's volunteered with the theater groups and giving these kids like creative freedom to express themselves when building and making props and things, and just the joy she gets from being able to see them flourish and use their imagination, and be very proud of what they've created without just by giving them the space to do so, which is exactly what you're doing with your daughter and her friends. And I love to see that. And speaking of you'll love to see it, that's our last segment of our episode, where every week we end on a positive note and we each share something that has happened within the last week that we want to just share as like a positive. It could be sewing related, it could be life related, it really doesn't matter. And if it's okay, I'll go first, if that's okay. I have a you'll love to see it. I actually made these yesterday. I needed a little creative brain break, and I have a sewing retreat coming up. Obviously, when this is airing, it will have already happened. But one of my things I'm doing is these fun swag bags, and I'm putting a lot of personal touches into them because it is a small group retreat. And I wanted some sort of tag to hang on the outside of the bag so I could identify whose bag is who, because they each have their own shirts and size and inside of it. And so, but I wanted it to be something like that they could reuse. I'm not just gonna like put a sticker on the bag or something. Like I'm not. I got to go above and beyond. So I ended up making these fun little quilted luggage tags yesterday. I haven't even shown Audra these. How cute are these?
Oh, those are awesome.
And they've got the little clear pouches, and they're quilted on both sides with the little buttonhole and everything. This is a Designs by Juju embroidery pattern, and it's completely done in the embroidery hoop.
Oh, I love that.
So, I mean, I was able to make two at once in one embroidery hoop, but I have bigger hoops. So now that I've done two, I'm like, oh, I could probably make four in my biggest grand hoop, So I'm going to be cranking out these this weekend and put their names in each of these. And then they'll have ribbons and they'll attach the bags, everything. And then they can use them for whatever they want. But I just was like trying to find something creative but reusable for them and super cute. So again, like, I don't know, my little love, you'll love to see it, is I've gotten really into like embroidery projects that are done in the hoop. I had done some in the past. I'm not the best at like designing them, but Designs by Juju, is her website. She's got all sorts of embroidery designs. That's my you'll love to see it. Misty, what's yours this week?
So mine is actually much simpler. I had kind of a rough winter. I feel like it was the most wintry winter of all time, and things have been fully in bloom here in Missouri. The flowers are blooming, the trees are in bloom. I mean, it is just absolutely gorgeous, and it has been giving me life, and I needed that so much. And so every time I go outside right now, it is just bringing me so much joy. And so yeah, that's it. I just love to see flowers in springtime.
And Audra, what about you?
So my love to see it is work related, and it's always good when you have a work related love to see it, right? Every year, Sally Tomato opens up applications for our certified educator program, which is a program that I run point on. And right now, our applications have closed, and I'm in the midst of doing get to know you sessions with all of the people who have applied to be certified educators. And it is just, I honestly think I get more out of these conversations than they do, because I love hearing all the different backgrounds and why people are passionate about sewing and what they hope to gain as being part of the program. I walked out of those sessions and I think I felt like $1 million, which is pretty hilarious. I'm like, all these people are so incredible in their backgrounds and how they got started and why they sew and why they would like to do this. And it's just, their energy brings me energy. And it's just so wonderful to meet all these incredible people who are part of our creative community and want to share that love of sewing and teaching around the country. And it makes my heart incredibly full.
That's amazing. Sounds like it fills your cup in a lot of ways. And I love when the community makes us feel that way, right? Like, especially with all the hard work that each of us puts into what we do. That's really sweet. Thank you for sharing that. These are some good You Love to See It's this week. I love it. All right. So, Misty, obviously, thank you so much for being a part of our conversation this week and sharing so much with us.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me. I wouldn't miss it. I'm glad to be here.
Why don't you make sure to tell our listeners where people can find you so they can make sure to follow along on all of your sewing journeys and teaching adventures?
Of course, I share a little bit about, behind the scenes of what I do and what I'm up to, mostly on Instagram. That's where I spend probably the majority of my time, and that's just at Misty Doan. But also you can catch all of my tutorials over on the Missouri Star YouTube channel. And so, like we mentioned earlier, I do At Home with Misty every Monday. And then Homespuns release kind of on special occasions. Now I had to dial that back a little bit just for bandwidth. And then the second Friday of every month, Natalie and I do double takes together.
We're so grateful to have learned some stuff from you today and continue to follow along with what you're doing. And I cannot wait to hear all about your Kenya trip when you get back. This is our 10th episode. This is like a big deal. We're excited for these milestones and we want to celebrate them every bit. And so if you haven't joined our Social Sewist Facebook group, this is a community where you get to chat with us and other listeners and share your feedback, answer the, icebreaker question, share your You Love to See It. We share a lot of links and things over there as well to resources to help you and let you know what's going on in the community. But coming up next week, we do have an episode all about overcoming creative blocks and getting that sojo back. Audra and I are going to share some of our best tips and practices to help you. If you haven't already, go follow us on Instagram, follow our Facebook page, and subscribe to our YouTube channel because yes, if you're listening, you can also watch these episodes over on our YouTube channel. All right. Well, thank you so much, Misty. We really appreciate it so much. This has been fun.
Yep. Hopefully I'll see you guys soon. Thank you so much.
Yes. Bye. Happy sewing.